transportation, including Florida, California, and Oregon. We also have Mia Candy, who's a project planner with Tool Design. Pronouns are she and her. She's an urban planner who works at the intersection of public health, education, and urban planning and design, and began her career as a facilitator for youth education and leadership seminars in South Africa. Presenting along with her is Stephanie Jim, program manager at Transform Program, pronouns are she and her. And she's always been passionate about building healthier and more active communities, most interested in making sure that healthy choices are appealing and, most importantly, accessible to everybody. Prior to joining Transform, she worked with the Injury Prevention Program at the City of Berkeley. And that's where she helped to coordinate activities that promote physical activity. And then from Palo Alto, we have two of the Palo Alto Safe Routes to School coordinators. We have Rosie Mesterhazy, pronouns are she and her. She has spent the last 13 years working for Safe Routes to School programs across the country. And for the last 5 years, she has coordinated Safe Routes to School programs for Palo Alto's City Office of Transportation. Her motto is model the behavior with joy, and she certainly does that. She lives car-free in Palo Alto. José Palma, her esteemed colleague, is also a Palo Alto Safe Routes to School coordinator. Pronouns are he and him. And he has over 3.5 years of consulting experience in transportation planning and engineering. He earned his master's degrees in both transportation engineering and in city and regional planning from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I believe Dr. Pande was one of his professors or mentors. He came to the Bay Area from Los Angeles and has been carless ever since. And he says he hopes to get an electric folding bike in the future, and I believe we rode together on a regular folding bike last year. So welcome all panelists. So we're going to get started with Dr. Pande. So Chelsea, can you go ahead and share the slides, please?
Thank you, Anne. And yes, Jose was one of the great students we had a few years ago. I don't remember how many years ago now, but it's been a while, 3 or 4 years, maybe lost track. But yes, so it's good to be presenting with Jose and all the colleagues here. Okay, so I will be talking about the neighborhood effects of Safe Routes to School program. On the likelihood of active travel to school. And as a parent of a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, this is in my professional as well as personal interest, because, my kids go to school and I encourage them to take the active modes. The Safe Routes to School program is really, really important to me. And I want to acknowledge my colleagues who were involved in this work. Dr. Carol Vulgaris, who used to be our colleague at Cal Poly, up until 2 years ago, and she's since moved to Harvard University. Rehani was a graduate student at San Jose State University, and then Serena Alexander, who's a professor also assistant professor also at San Jose State University. So I will be talking about to what extent Safe Routes to School program or presence of a program has an impact on if people will choose to use active modes to school. Next slide, please. Next one. This was the title slide. Okay, so there are basically for the Safe Routes to School program, there are 6 different sort of elements of this, 6 E's as we call them, and their education, encouragement, and I know we used to talk about enforcement, but we've since become aware of a lot of issues that go with traffic enforcement and so forth. So more of an engagement where we have the community volunteers that sort of make sure that the traffic laws are being followed in the school zones, engineering, equity, and evaluation. So this project really focused on, this was project funded by the Moderator Transportation Institute. And we got a lot of support from the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition that was a stakeholder for this project. And so this really focuses on evaluation, sort of looking back at the schools where there is such a program and to what extent this has helped in increasing the active mode share to schools. So just a real quick background on Safe Routes to School, and I think most people here would be familiar with this, is that under MAP 2021 or MAP 21 in 2012, the federal Safe Routes to School program was sort of discontinued, but there has been there has been some active travel funding that the states can still use to fund these programs, and most states do choose to fund these programs through different ways. So in terms of the next slide, please. I'm sorry, I forgot to say the next slide because I was looking at my screen. My apologies. And so I've already talked about this. The next one. So in terms of the methods that we've used in this research was quantitative methods as well as the qualitative methods. So for the quantitative methods, what we did was we looked at the California household travel survey data, and we looked at the land use and demographic factors that affected the success of the SRTS program. And then for the qualitative research, we conducted in-depth interviews with individuals that are involved in planning and implementing the SRTS programs at the individual school level. Next slide, please. So our study was focused on these 4 counties, Santa Clara, San Mateo, Alameda, and Contra Costa counties in the Bay Area. And we looked at, for all these 4 counties, we looked at the census tracts that involved population that were serving a school that had an active SRTS program, Safe Routes to School program. And then for the same counties, we also looked at the census tracts that did not have a school with the SRTS program, the Safe Routes to School program. And just for the information, the SRTS tract accounted for about 24 to 30% of the students, and the rest of the students were in the non-SRTS tracts. Next slide, please. So here is in terms of the methods, we looked at, we looked at these control variables. There were the commute distance to school, household income, race and ethnicity, gender of the head of the household, presence of non-working household, adult in the household, housing unit density, average block length, share of population between 5 and 14-year-old, and the resident workers who walk to work in that tract. So because we use these factors because we knew from the literature that these are important in terms of the mode choice to school. Next slide, please. So here is sort of the statistical analysis. I'm not going to go into all of the details, and this is basically just talking about the details of all the factors that I mentioned and how they were coded in the analysis. And there were like 4 different analyses that were conducted, and they're accounted for different interaction terms and so forth. And ultimately what we were looking for, or what we were looking to model, is the probability of using an active mode to school. What is the probability that a particular student will choose an active mode to school? So here are some of the results. Next slide, please. So here are some of the results. What we noticed was that in general, accounting for all the confounding factors, the students commuting to schools in the SRTS tracts were significantly more likely to commute by an active travel mode. So the probability of choosing an active mode was 36% for the SRTS tracts, and for the tracts without SRTS, it was only 28%. So there was, in fact, a significant difference between the 2 probabilities. Next slide, please. And if you dig down into the data, what we were able to find is that, so yes, this overall number was somewhat impressive, but I think when you start to dig down into the data and you look at some key confounding factors like the race of the students and also how far from the school do they live. So what we found was very interesting is that if you go at a distance of like 1.2 miles, so one thing that we looked at was specifically look at the 2 race classes that were less likely to commute by active mode. So we looked at non-Hispanic white males and Asian and Pacific Islander male students. And if you look at those numbers, you find that specifically at those characteristics, you find that if the distance to school is more than 1.2 miles, then there is no significant difference. So whether or not you have the SRTS program or not, the probability of choosing the active mode is same, and it's very low. But I think where the programs really shine is if your school is located within that walking distance of 0.7 miles. And if you look at the literature, 0.7 miles has been identified as sort of the walking threshold to school. So really, if you have students that live within 0.7 miles of the school, Safe Routes to School program can really make a difference. So that was sort of the big result that we found through our analysis. So this is where Safe Routes to School can really shine. Next slide, please. Then we also looked at the qualitative analysis, where we conducted interviews with school administrators and parents that were involved with the SRTS program. And what we found was something that was very interesting, is that the SRTS program in the Bay Area have really emphasized education and encouragement. Some of the unique recent initiatives that were part of the SRTS program include the free bike repair services. And I think that was sort of interesting to us, that we were not thinking about this, but it came up in multiple conversations, is that this is something that parents have found to be useful and interesting as part of the SRTS program. One interview emphasized the need for increased visible safety measures within the community and near schools, such as having more parent volunteers, adding speed bumps, and increasing the number of teachers out on the yard duty. So this was something that came out in the interviews as well. And overall, I think we found that a lot of interviews also emphasize the community aspect of being able to walk and bike to school. Like if there are kids that are walking together and biking together, they were more focused in the classroom, and they were able to have that social interaction outside the classroom. So that was also very interesting to us. Next slide, please.
Dr. Pande, we need to wrap up. If sorry to burst in, but
yeah, for sure. Thank you. I didn't hear the ding noises earlier, so maybe I just missed it in my enthusiasm for the speaker. So I'll just kind of, if you can slide 2 slides, if you can move forward 2 slides to my conclusion slides. So I think or just run 1 slide about that. So SRTS programs are really important, and they really make a big difference within that shorter walking distance. And then qualitative data suggests that there is appreciation for engagement and education elements of these programs. And the next slide has our contact information for the 2 co-PIs for this project. So feel free to reach out to us in case of any questions. And my apologies for going a little bit over time. Thank you.
no worries at all, Dr. Pande. I know we can all feel your enthusiasm and passion for this. Thank you so much for your providing your contact info as well. So next up, we have Mia Candy and Stephanie Jim talking about the Alameda County Safe Routes to School.
Thanks, Anne. Next slide. So just as a quick intro, Tool Design is a planning, design, and engineering firm focused on active transportation. We work in all 9 Bay Area counties, and we lead hundreds of Safe Routes projects across the country. I lead the Tool Design Bay Area Safe Routes practice, and I'm based in our Oakland office. I am also the consultant project manager for the education and outreach piece of the Alameda County Safe Routes to Schools program. And our program is funded by Alameda CTC, and it's one of the largest in the country. We have over 260 schools enrolled, and this year actually marks our 15th anniversary. So next slide. As we all know, last year was really tough for our schools and for our kids. And so as we were trying to figure out how to run a fully remote program, it was really important to us that whatever we did was in service to schools. We were determined not to add any additional stress or pressure to our students and our parents and our teachers. So we were in with our school contacts to understand what it was that they needed. And we are really proud that we were able to offer a full year of responsive and flexible digital education and encouragement. So Stephanie and I are going to share some of our highlights and lessons learned. Our hope is that we can provide some inspiration and generate some excitement for this upcoming school year because, you know, as things are evolving, there is still so much uncertainty and anxiety around the pandemic. So one of our biggest successes was our big events. And for each year, we run 4 countywide events. And last year, we converted 2 of them to be fully digital and online. And then we created 2 brand new events. So the first one, which I want to share, was in May. In place of Bike to School Day, we created an event called Bike to the Moon Week. And this was a cooperative event where students, families, neighbors, and even elected officials all worked together to log their minutes and their miles of physical activity. We had over 2,400 people participate and log their hours. And together we logged enough moon miles to make it all the way to the moon and actually back back to earth again. So for this event, what we learned was that people were really excited by a fresh theme and new graphics, as well as collective goal setting that we found that really encouraged people to participate. And then also tracking our progress daily helped generate excitement. Next slide. In normal years, we work with high school students to run an event called Cocoa for Carpools. Of course, last year we couldn't do that because we couldn't encourage students to carpool. So we went back to the drawing board and we developed Creation for Transportation. So this was an event where students submitted art that told the story of their transportation choices and how those choices impact their communities and the environment. So our winning submission was actually a short story written by 2 students from McClemens High School. And these images are some of the runner-up submissions. Next slide. We had so many other wins last year. One was for our first ever all virtual walk and roll week. We had over 2,000 kids submit these mode tracking passports. And because we couldn't run any in-person events, we were able to redirect some program resources towards participation incentives. So next slide. We selected almost 100 student winners and each of them received a scooter and a helmet. And a key lesson learned was that it's pretty much a logistical nightmare to order and ship over 100 separate items directly to students' homes, but that's what we did. And in the end, we loved being able to get, an actual active transportation tool into the hands of our students. One kind of final takeaway from the year that was a great success was that we changed all of our events so that kids and families could track any type of physical activity. We wanted to make sure that everyone had equal opportunity for participating. So kids could track if they did yoga or stretching or dancing or playing sports, and they could do it, from their own neighborhood or their own living room. And that really helped just make our program more accessible and more equitable. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie, who's going to talk about our ongoing events.
Thank you so much, Mia. So my name is Stephanie Jim, and as part of the Education and Outreach Group, I lead the Safe Routes Site Coordinator team at Transform. Transform is a nonprofit that promotes walkable communities with excellent transportation choices to connect people of all incomes to opportunity, make California affordable, and help solve our climate crisis. And so I'm just going to shift a little bit and talk about ongoing events. And really thinking about building habits over time. I'm going to talk about how we adapted activities like walking school buses, bike trains, regular walk and rolls, and share some highlights and lessons learned as well. Next slide, please. And so first up, I will talk about wellness walks and pen pals. Wellness walks encourages walking by providing a theme for each month and offering suggestions for incorporating them into your daily walk. And so then on top of that, to help students feel connected to one another, we had pen pals, which basically builds on each of these themes. And then students are encouraged to write a letter based on a prompt, and that letter can be dropped off at a friend's home along your walk. I think that the biggest lesson learned here was that it's really great to try and align your events to things that are happening nationwide. So like, for example, May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. And so nationally, our May theme was all about mental health. And this is just about trying to make that greater connection between conversations that students might be having at home or in the school to the importance of walking and rolling. Next slide, please. And we had transportation story time, where site coordinators are visiting the virtual classroom and reading stories about walking, rolling, and taking transit. It's just another way to encourage healthy living. And in fact, after we read a story about biking, one student said, I am going to get on a bike right after school gets out. Last year, we had 48 transportation storytime events and reached over 1,800 elementary school students. And I think the biggest highlight from last year was working with elected officials to be our guest readers. Here you can see this is Alameda County Transportation Commission Chair Pauline Cutter. She pre-recorded herself reading this book, Bicycling Rules of the Road, and we broadcasted the video to schools in her district. It's just really fun to see commissioners elected outside their normal job. Next slide, please. And then there's the Go Green curriculum. And so we transformed this into a virtual offering, and the lessons teach students about the benefits of changing their transportation mode in order to protect the ecosystems and increase physical activity. And so last year we had 19 presentations, and we reached about 370 elementary and middle school students. And our biggest lesson learned here was that it's rather difficult to align with teachers' schedules. We all know teachers are very busy and they've got a lot on their plates. And so even though there's a ton of interest, it can be sometimes difficult to align schedules. Next slide, please. So then we have travel training, which is our activity to help support middle school students who are interested in starting to walk, bike, and take transit to wherever. And so this curriculum covers things like bike ped safety, how to use transportation, and how to obtain and use a student transit pass or a youth clipper card. Last year, we had 48 trainings and reached about 991 middle school students. Our biggest lesson learned here was, again, aligning schedules with teachers. But what we really learned was that this found a home with PE teachers. They really got on board with some of the things that that was covered in this travel training curriculum. Next slide, please. And so, we, like all of us, I hope, are looking forward to this upcoming year. But I'm also realizing very quickly that just like last year, everything is always changing. And so just taking some cues from last year, one, like it's so important to collaborate with one another, not just within the team, but also across all Safe Routes to Schools programs across the Bay Area and beyond. I think that we're always trying to cross-promote Safe Routes programs, because I think that this is the time now to really strengthen safe routes across the Bay Area. And so I really want to say, let's continue to be in touch and share resources. Here are 4 different ways to learn more about our programs and to get in touch with us if you wish. So I just want to wrap up and say it has been a pleasure sharing with you all of these school-based activities we developed this past year. And I'm just looking forward to connecting with, hearing about leveraging partnerships that our friends over in Palo Alto are about to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Mia. We appreciate this wonderful presentation you made. And now we will get to hear from Rosie Mesterhazy and Jose Palma from City of Palo Alto.
Rosie, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. And Stephanie, thanks for that wonderful segue. As you know, I'm also Alameda County Safe Routes to School alumni, and really enjoyed working and being a part of that super creative and top-notch team, and continuing to have the conversation, as you mentioned, around Safe Routes to School and the pandemic, and how we pivot and how we shift modes and shift our culture and leverage some of the realities of the pandemic to support walking and biking, at least a small upshot in what has otherwise been a very, very difficult year. Next slide, please. That's our cover slide. Moving forward. I'm going to focus more in this presentation on what we did rather than what our takeaways have been. We, like Stephanie mentioned, thought this would be a year of challenge where we could learn a couple of things, add a couple of things to our toolkit, but that there would not be an ongoing need to focus on social distancing and the creating a completely online curriculum, for example. We're seeing that is less the case. We're seeing a more slow transition back into our in-school bike and pedestrian safety programming. But we have really taken a lot. We've piloted a lot of new things. And so the year has been about transition and transformation. And we'll talk about these transformations today within the lens of our Safe Routes to School partnership, which is comprised of our city, our school district, as well as our PTA parent community. And we saw really great changes in all of those, mainly our district supporting guidelines that promoted active and shared transportation. That was essential to our conducting our education, our K-8 education programs in school this year. We had new staff and were able to finally build out equity and inclusion in a way that we had not yet had an opportunity to do. And then we also, and I think there's even some Palo Alto parents on this call right now in the photo, that supported more socially distanced bike rides and took advantage of the reduced car traffic to get more families to learn about the secret routes, the secret bike and walk routes around Palo Alto. Next slide, please. The bottom line, we were in the same situation as Safe Routes to School programs throughout the country. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We mainly rely on hands-on or interactive classroom-based bike safety education. And what are we going to do to pivot into an online model? What are we going to even do to make sure that we continue to teach these classes? We typically have K-8 education that's compulsory in all the classrooms. Meanwhile, the school district is just trying to focus on, air purifiers and things that are super related to social distancing. And how do we even just get our foot in the door and make sure that these teachers, who now only have a half hour to teach where they used to have 1 hour, are going to prioritize safe routes to school? Well, we were very fortunate that the school district invited us to the school reopening guidelines subcommittee working group. And that is where we lifted up the importance of active transportation in promoting health and safety, and also reducing some of the offsets of the pandemic, and as a prevention mode, getting more people out there and making sure that they are walking and biking and doing so safely. So we were able to create language in the school reopening guidelines that supported active transportation. We used that language in the district as the foundation for our superintendent to say, Safe Routes to School programs will continue this year with the addition of social distancing mechanisms added in. And that saved our lives. If we had not had said that, there would have been no precedent for us to continue to conduct in-school Safe Routes to School programming. And I can promise you that the majority of teachers would have said, we can't do this. We've got too many other things to teach with no time to do it. So we also updated the travel policy language. At the beginning of the year, when you arrive at school, books will be placed in your trunk. And thanks to our parent advocates, amongst others, new language like head to the walk bike drive-through to pick up your materials. As you can see in the picture on the lower right corner, we lifted up the importance of that kind of language. And I think that helped to encourage active and shared transportation whenever possible. Next slide, please. As far as education, like Stephanie mentioned, we had to go fully digital, which meant 19 new Safe Routes to School presentations in short order. With the help of José, my colleague, 5,942 students received 238,920 minutes of Safe Routes to School education this year. We're really proud of that accomplishment, and we were able to do this by also creating new seamless scheduling procedures. Prior to this, we had been sending one-off letters to teachers and communicating one-on-one, but we found some apps that helped to streamline our admin processes so that we could focus more on content and outreach. I also wanted to give a big shout out to our SVBC partners who helped us conduct our summer bike rodeo series, where our summer bike rodeos our bike rodeos are typically one of the highlights of the third grade experience. We conduct them in class and in school. We had to conduct them this summer as more of an opt-in program with 120 participants. We hope to continue with the in-school programming next year. Next slide. We also, as Stephanie talked about, leveraging with Mental Health Month, Safe Routes to School programs, we leveraged our Ruby Bridges Walk and Roll Day with Black History Month, so we could focus on equity and inclusion. Piloted that with 30 participants. We conducted an adaptive bike fitting event this summer in partnership with the Bay Area Outdoor Recreation Program, and supported 20 exceptional needs students in being fitted for adaptive cycles. That's something I've been trying to do for about 5 years. I was really excited we got to roll that out. José led on Spanish language. Oh, José, I'm like covering your slide.
That's fine. We are short on time, so
I was on a roll.
That's
No pun
okay.
intended. I'm going to hand this off to José.
Thanks, Rose. So yeah, as Rose was explaining to us, some of the pivoting stuff that we had to do, especially for myself in helping the school district in order to reach out to families who have maybe not been counted for, especially those who are Spanish speakers. I had the opportunity to do a presentation on just that, safe routes to school. And a lot of parents had no idea that their kids were being taught this stuff before and during the pandemic about bike safety or pedestrian safety in the first, second, and third grade. So that was something of a surprise to them, but also reassurance and sort of gratefulness for the program that's available to them. We were also able to show, have bike repair events for middle school and high schoolers, thanks to our school district that allowed us to do this and the advocacy of our parents from the PTA. So that was something that was very much included. And also due to the fact that a lot of bike shops were very much booked and also there was not space, this was very much welcome for these students, especially some of them, their bikes were not being fixed due to the pandemic. So of importance, as Pande was mentioning before as well. Next slide. The next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was, we figured out that there's this like digital divide that was alive and well, and how do we reach certain groups of population that are sometimes excluded from access to information, including some people who might just have one iPad and have like 3 kids. How do we make sure that they're involved in education and information related to safe routes to school? So we thought, why don't we think about this proposal where we put together what's called MIKE, the Mobility Information Kiosk, e-bike, which through Measure B funds, we were able to propose this ability of creating this mobile information kiosk to get to different parts of the city, including parks, certain schools, and other locations where we can go. We can do a one-on-one with people who might be interested in safe routes to school information. And to do that for myself, for example, in Spanish, if there are people out there who would like to know more information. We've also worked with Bikes Make Life Better to create what you see here in the picture on the right, and also a local artist that drew a picture of one of our parks to kind of just create this form of inviting and ability to communicate with people at any time, including just inviting them to speak with us so they can get that information that is very much needed, including demonstrations of how to pump up a bike or how to put on a helmet correctly. These were things that we were thinking about when we were putting this together. And we're launching this week. So if you see us around in Palo Alto, make sure you say hi to me or Rose, and we'll be there to say hi.
Hey, Jose, we're actually a couple minutes over time. Can you put up a slide with the contact info and just sort of famous last sentence?
Well, there's still much to do, and we're so excited to be here and to share with you, and reach us out if you can on the Safe Routes to School page at City of Palo Alto, and we'll be definitely to inform and share more information to how to secure and help more students to bike to and from school and walk as well. Thanks.
And I just also wanted to speak to Dr. Pande's point through his data. In Palo Alto, our school district boundaries match those of our city. And so we have a lot of families living locally, which is why we have approximately 68% of our kids walking, biking, and using transit. So we're very fortunate to have that kind of overlap. I know it can be difficult in Alameda County or locations where the boundaries do not overlap. Not impossible, but it is part of our secret sauce in getting so much engagement and buy-in from our school.
Thank you so much, Rosie. Appreciate all of this great information from both of you and all of our presenters. So we have some questions here. So one for Dr. Pande from Gabby in Santa Clara. She says that my daughter goes to a lottery school, which ends up being a commuter school. We bike to school, but unfortunately, I admit it's not feasible for most families to bike or walk. I've tried to advocate for getting a school bus offered. Can Safe Routes to School help with this? I need help with our specific school and district.
I'm not really familiar with the exact administration of the SRTS program, so I'm not sure if they advocate for bus service. I'm sure there are people on the panel that are more informed than I am on this one. Are there... Is it Safe Routes to...
Anne, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure.
Or the last part of the question.
Yeah, she says she wanted to know about getting a school bus for her school and district, and she wanted to know if there's a way Safe Routes to School programs can help with this.
I mean, typically the school district has a transportation coordinator that leads on busing. And so some, amongst other things, or that is a part of someone's role. So I would connect with the district and find out who in their municipal, not municipals, but their operations admin office leads on coordinating. They have some sort of busing for exceptional needs students or for other students. And so forming a partnership with the district, our busing person was a big part of our Safe Routes to School partnership and still lifts that up. And we prioritize that in a number of ways. Happy to have an offline conversation on how we've accomplished that.
Awesome. So Rosie, you're not off the hook yet. You have another question. So from Mia, from one of your colleagues on the panel, she said that I'd love to hear more about the scheduling apps. Can you tell us more?
Okay, full disclosure, I am not a paid shill, but I do want to sing the praises of the Calendly app from the highest mountaintops. And we did hear from another Safe Routes program that said, we looked at Calendly, but decided not to do it because it would potentially eliminate one of our coordinator positions. It really was, and I said, well, you guys probably move that person to do more program meaningful coordination stuff and save yourself some time in the admin side. But that saved us a lot of time instead of having to send out individual letters, confirming things, having everything on automatic, give responses, enabling people to schedule their own activities. We had very little, once we figured it out, it was a total mess at the beginning as we were trying to do online education, because it wasn't just online education in one classroom. There was distance learning. There was hybrid learning. There were two different approaches within that group. Hybrid meaning kids that were actually still coming to school for like 2 hours a day. Distance meaning the kids were fully distant and they were disparate groups. Then there was like every age level. Then there were grades with combo classrooms. So second and third was one classroom. So we had to it was three-dimensional chess. And once we figured out how to use the Calendly app to schedule, I would say 90%.
Secretaries loved us after using Calendly, just saying, like it was just the rapport.
Not a paid shill, but look into it if that is one of the biggest challenges in coordinating your program, is staying on top of communication and scheduling.
Awesome. So Rosie, you have 2 more questions. One from Ari. Where did you get the volunteers for the bike repair events? I also want to know the answer to this.
All right, well, Jose, maybe you can also back me up on this. As I said, to Dr. Pande's point, we have a 50-year partnership really with the PTA and with our school district. All of our, and Ari, thanks for your question. All of our schools have Safe Routes to School coordinators, or at least most of the time. These are parents that are playing the role of organizing. Because we have such a huge number of kids walking and biking, like 68%, the warrant for this is significant. There was a major concern the kids were not getting as much education as they normally do this year. They were riding around on broken bikes. There was an equity and inclusion issue there because students who didn't have access, or like Jose said, couldn't get into the bike shop, were potentially riding safety compromised bicycles. So we had the district push back and did not want to conduct these events on campus. And thanks to our parent advocates who literally took this all the way up to the superintendent and all the way across to the Board of Education, we got their buy-in. And they basically said the PTA is all about inclusion. And if we cannot offer this service that the city is paying for to support our student riders, we're going to have more cars, we're going to increase the risk of injury, we're going to have students who don't have the tools they need to ride safely. So in addition to setting up the bike repair events, Jose and I set up info tables, and I would pull the parents in and say, let me show you this, let me show you this walk and roll map. That has been a part of our school every year, but we were unable to do it at the beginning of the year. We managed to get it in at the end. How do you get volunteers is the subject of many a Safe Routes to School webinar. And while I don't have the answer to that one, it's all case by case. My suggestion is forming personal relationships and makes more of a difference than anything else. I live in the community I work in. These are my neighbors. I have a 6-year-old. And so it is very much a we as opposed to a me thing. And I think that resonates in the community. You don't always have to have kids. You don't always have to have that kind of a connection. But when I was in Alameda County, of course, I couldn't be in Pleasanton and Oakland, but VIP, all of these parents became my friends. And that was really important. We shared common goals. And so I tried to be more than my position, tried to go above and beyond whenever possible. Is that right, Stephanie? Is that when you're the county, it's harder to do. Thanks, Jose. Anything else you want to say?
I was just gonna know, it's true, that built a community, because even though I don't live in Palo Alto, but I'm frequently there and I bike around there, I'm usually able to spot somebody that I know and I wave at them. How's it going? Everything's good, and it's just this form of community that we build, and most importantly, people are informed, especially when it comes to how do we get more volunteers. I always think about the kind of stride I've been trying to do to connect with the Spanish speaking community through PUSD's family engagement specialists, which focus on helping these families who are first or English learners who are beyond Spanish speakers, and how to let them know about bike safety and education about pedestrian cross, all these things of just where they exist and how can they participate and how can they be informed, and more importantly, how can they share that information with their network. So then we continue to kind of this web of bringing in people who are interested in being how do I get involved with this? And that's what we try to do.
Awesome. We have actually 2 questions from Sonali. She has one for Dr. Pande and one for Rosie and Jose. So for Dr. Pande, is the data published, or where can we see the map of census tracts analyzed in the study?
So the full report and most of the information relevant information from the project is available at the link that I just shared. And then if there is something that's not available, if you're looking for the raw data, feel free to reach out to me or Carol. And I don't think I have the raw data right on me, but I can get it from Carol, my colleague, Dr. Vulgaris, if the data is not available already on the MTI portal.
Awesome, thank you. And then from Sonali for Rosie and Jose, can you please share the district's travel policy for us to share with districts that we work with to model?
Absolutely. And I also want to say that we derived this language, some of this language, from the San Mateo County Office of Education policy. Big shout out to them. Big shout out to the County of San Francisco. We pulled language from that. Huge shout out to the Santa Clara County Health Department for rallying our Safe Routes to School South Peninsula and South County providers to also craft this language so that the County Office of Education could could implement that, which would and still is essential right now, I think, for some of the other communities where students did not come back to school in October like they did in Palo Alto. And so, yes, I'd love to share that as a best practice, and highly encourage, if you are not having the Safe Routes to School education program conversation yet with your school district or in your community, to initiate that right now, because the school year is starting, and it's just, it falls down on people's priority lists so quickly that you will see that backslide. You will see a backslide if you don't keep lifting up the importance of promoting active and shared transportation through inclusive language and programming. So Jose or Stephanie, how's Alameda County done with guidelines?
Working with the district, you mean?
Yes.
And we are kind of, right now, each site coordinator. So we have a team of 7, just a little bit of background. And so each site coordinator kind of is responsible more or less for their own district. And so I think, because we have, 7 different districts, school districts, it finding a way, coordinating some kind of like an effort across Alameda County just is going to look a little different and is a little more complex. But I will say that what we've done is we've started conversations with some school districts and trying to get them to, for example, like encourage all schools to participate in in our big events, and trying to like come up with language around those kinds of encouragements coming from the district level. I will say that, for example, Pleasanton Unified is interested in coming up with some language around this. But I think that's really as far as we've gone in terms of creating something that is clear, has a clear goal and outcome to it.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions.